Well, good evening, good afternoon, maybe good morning for some of you. Thrilled that you could join us for our evening with Anna Sale. My name is Michael Hebb, and I'm the founder of EOL.community and Death Over Dinner. And we'll be joined by a couple other special guests tonight. Megan Devine and Logan Ury will come in and join us in about 20 minutes. But first, I get a little bit of just alone time with Anna to chat about her new book, Let's Talk About Hard Things. And most of you know, but if you don't know, Anna is the host of what is one of my favorite podcasts, and I think one of America's favorite podcasts, maybe the world's favorite podcast, Death, Sex, and Money. But we're here to talk about the hard stuff. We're here to talk about taboo. Thanks for being here, Anna.
Thank you for having me, Michael.
And because it's kind of exciting, and you told us, where are you tonight?
Oh, I'm in Cody, Wyoming. If you're not familiar with Wyoming, we are on the eastern side of Yellowstone National Park, named for buffalo. So it's a land of large landscapes, elk, wolves, bears, deer, pronghorn antelope, rivers. It's pretty beautiful.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. And I've been in Cody, and it makes me excited just to think about it and think about you there. So you decided, or life decided in some way, to have you focus on the things that we avoid, the taboo topics, specifically death, sex, and money, but you deal with all kinds of taboo topics. And I'm just curious why you think why is it that Anna Sale is doing this work and going into these places?
You know, I have been reflecting on that while I was writing the book, and even more while I've been talking about it with people, because it is totally surprising to me. Because there are some people who come to the work of taboo things because they feel magnetized by the idea of, sort of like the kind of breaking things open with shock, and that's not really for me. My personality is much more about like, this is kind of like what I do in every conversation that I'm talking with someone, whether it's a dinner party or an interview for work, or my husband. I'm like trying to figure out what they're telling me, like the emotional landscape of what I'm hearing. Just I'm like kind of thinking about it and want to dig in more. And when you do that, you will run into taboo things. So for me, it was more about kind of a choice at some point, which is like, I know that the emotional landscape of all of our lives is littered with this stuff that we feel deep kind of shame or stuckness around. And rather than pretend that we don't, I just ask and share about how those landmines are showing up for each of us rather than pretend they're not there. So it's more from a kind of like, actually, I think coming from politics, covering politics as a public radio reporter, just really wanting to kind of like name things that I was seeing and reporting on and saying, like, this is really what's going on. Let's not pretend that these things aren't profoundly affecting how we experience the world.
Yeah, no, I mean it makes perfect sense to me. It's those of us who work squarely in the death world always have this kind of genesis story. I mean, it really does feel like the work chooses us.
Yeah.
Um, it's not obvious work, um, and something opens up. And to that point, since you mentioned journalism, you have a different brand of journalism that is deeply personal, and you're very, very generous with sharing about your private life, and sharing about what you're going through personally, things that you've even found embarrassing or challenging. Like you show it all, which I think is really, really powerful. But that's probably not the journalism that you were taught, or maybe you practiced for many years. I'm just curious about how that came to be, why you made that decision, and what you think it brings to these topics.
Yeah. I mean, certainly like when you start out in journalism, the idea that I had was like, how do I establish myself as an authority for my audience so they will trust me to be their narrator of whatever I'm telling them about? And that is about um, projecting yourself as kind of like smart, having figured it out. I'm going to tell you what happened today while you were doing your job. I was at the Capitol. Here's what happened. Trust me, you know, um, and and making the transition to doing personal journalism that is actually comes the origin is much more from like, here's what I haven't figured out, you all. How about you? It's like it's really different. And I think it actually wasn't uh, I needed a push to develop that part of my journalism. I actually pitched the idea for Death, Sex, and Money after I'd gotten divorced. My first marriage had ended. I was, kind of like what I was saying before, really interested in like, how do I make a show that's built around these things that I really believe are the fundamental building blocks of our lives, the fact of our immortality, and that we go through loss, that we all have relationship and have to figure out what kind of relationships we want to build and what they look like and who we take care of and who loves us. And then money, the fact that we all have to figure out how to survive and how to take care of others. And that was the sort of like intellectual framing for the show. And I was at dinner with a friend early on, and it was when I was in this tumultuous period with my relationship with my now husband, Arthur, and we were trying to figure out if we were going to be together, and we were long distance, and it had been this sort of saga of talking about how is this going to work and what might be and who needed to do what, accommodation, which led to this strange encounter with Alan Simpson, who's a former senator from Wyoming. So this really strange story showed up in my life as I was developing the show. And my friend over dinner was like, well, you have to do a radio story about this. If this is the work you're thinking about, like you have to turn inward and reveal that like, yeah, you don't, you haven't figured this out. And this is something that's where you've needed help. And it was really scary. Like I can remember tracking, when you track a radio story, sometimes you're alone in a studio, and sometimes you're just with your microphone and maybe a producer is listening in. And there was a line in that radio story that I did about Arthur and I figuring out if we were going to stay together. And I Alan Simpson and his wife Anne, who were together for 60 years, about their marriage and how the advice they were giving me. And there was this line of tracking I can still remember where the sentence was something like, look, like I was like establishing the stakes of the story. Look, uh, I'm divorced. I want to be a parent, and I'm really afraid of wasting time. And it was this sentence that was like the fundamental scary question about whether this relationship was going to be one that I was going to build my life around with Arthur, because I was coming out of the kind of wound of having a marriage end and didn't trust myself, and didn't know what that meant as far as time, because I wanted to be a mom. And to read that into a radio studio at my workplace, I like was shaking. Like it was not the kind of work that I had done. But I am so grateful that that's how the show started, because it wasn't conscious. But I think what that did was it created this space built around, modeling that this was a place where you could come without having figured out something to be, you didn't have to present how you'd figured out something. We were all going to be trading notes about where we felt uncertain, scared, pained. And we were all in it together in different ways. So
Yeah.
it was uncomfortable, but I'm glad I got that push.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you placed it at the center of the DNA of the work. I mean, you
Yeah.
could have been doing reportage on death, sex, and money, right? Instead of
Yeah,
deciding.
that's how I thought the show was going to be at first, like funeral trends. Like I was like, that's interesting, but no, it became something very different.
And I get it. I mean, I've hosted thousands of death dinners, and people are asking me like, "Well, how does it stay interesting?" Right? similarly probably to you, you've hosted so many conversations. And what I found is that, vulnerability is immensely contagious. Um, and if I start a dinner by saying, what am I afraid to say? And then I say it, somebody else will do that. Has that been
Mhm.
consistent? I mean, you get people to talk about things that they generally don't talk about, and these are powerful people with a lot to lose, in their minds, right? Oftentimes,
Yeah.
and we all do. We all have something to lose by revealing ourselves, or so the story goes. Anyway, I don't know if it's actually true. I think the reverse might be true. But talk to me about that.
I think that part of it, what you described, that like the one of the opening quotes at the very start of my book is it's from Anne Simpson, who's still a very dear friend of mine. She says she loves to say, "Openness creates openness," and I just really believe that if you take that first step forward, someone will meet you and share something maybe they hadn't even said out loud to themselves. Um, so I think that that can happen through hard conversation. I also think you mentioned like when I talk to people who are, maybe famous or who have a lot to lose, or maybe even, have never talked to a journalist before. Um, it's not always that they're responding to me saying, well, here's this experience of vulnerability or loss I've had. How about you? Sometimes the other way, some amazing things can open up is just what happens when someone feels like they're being really listened to, and that like I've noticed through my work how unusual an experience that can be for people, to have someone say like, wait, what happened, like if with real interest and curiosity and follow-up questions, and like, take me there, what were you, how old were you when this happened, and when someone is really like trying to understand what a moment was like for you, and then you hear someone describing back to you, they're explaining the like that it wasn't just one feeling they were feeling at the time, they were feeling three different mixed feelings, and it's um that can be a really incredible way to have someone open up to you in ways that is really special.
Yeah. I mean, well, we've all been interviewed where we were given the questions, um, and then they ask the questions, and then we give the answers. And
Yeah.
for you to actually be present, which must be scary at times, right? Because you probably want to do a lot of homework, and you probably want to have a script, and sometimes you probably have to push that script aside, or maybe all the time.
Yeah, I often don't do interviews from a list of questions. I make a list ahead of time, and then I don't look at it for the most part while I'm interviewing. But it is scary. The thing I was thinking about today while I was interviewing someone was, how much do I want to keep asking questions, and how much do I want to say, here's what I hear you saying, like, and drawing connections for them and then getting their reaction, or letting them keep sort of talking. It's like it's improv always. Like, you have to make choices in the moment. Like, oh, if I make this choice, we're going to go off that way. And I want to, and then I'm have to loop back around if I want to get back to that. But that's why it's fun.
Absolutely. And to that point around listening, well, before we get to listening, because you do underscore the importance of it in your book. But before, and we're about to be joined by Megan, and Logan, but I would love to hear from you. I know that probably the people listening value difficult conversations, and hard conversations, and understand the importance of them, but we all need more inspiration. You probably find this for yourself too. I know I do. It's not like, I mean, I talk about the hardest stuff too, but I also need constantly inspiration to keep doing it with the people in my life. Why are these conversations, why are difficult conversations essential? And why are they healing?
I mean, I think talking about hard things outside of a personal relationship is can be really important and transformative and valuable. Like the kinds of conversations I have when I'm interviewing someone, or a conversation I have with somebody I meet on a plane, like, when you have the value of not having it a hard conversation inside a relationship, but instead you can sort of be observers of each other. Um, and having hard conversations in real life is so much harder in your personal life, like it's so hard to hear uh, someone you really care about tell you a way that you've let them down, and to really hear that and not explain back to them how they're not correct, like, or to want to say the thing that will not make their pain go away, but make you feel like you are doing something to make their pain go away. Like, we have all of these much more, um, it's much harder in a personal relationship because all that stuff gets in the way. Like, it's so hard to just witness each other talking about hard stuff, especially if it has to do with you or your relationship. But the reason to do it is because, like, if not, like, you don't know what's happening in the inner life of this person who you care about. And you don't know, you have an incomplete understanding of how your behavior, if it's in the context of a conflict in a relationship, is being read and felt by them. So it doesn't, I think hard conversations in our personal lives, we can be really honest, like, they often do not feel good in the immediate term. Like, maybe once you get 2/3 of the way through and you're actually like hearing each other and not reacting to one another. But man, when you get to that place 2/3 of the way in and you're hearing each other in a deeper way than you had been for maybe years, like, and you really see each other and feel heard, like, that's the best feeling there is. I think that's loving each other. That's seeing each other. That's not needing their narrative to be your narrative, but you honoring their narrative. Like, that is important.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's one of the reasons um, that we live, that we breathe, for
Yeah.
sure. And I think that you underscored this quote from Andrew Solomon, who's somebody I admire so much. But the absence of words is the absence of intimacy, and that's that feeling, right? It's a feeling of deep intimacy, and sometimes it's sexy, and sometimes it's playful, and sometimes it just feels like possibility and freedom and the things that you associate with childhood. And sometimes it feels like wisdom. And yeah, no, I think we're preaching to the choir, but we do have more members of the choir. Megan Devine is with us, I believe. Megan, are you there?
I'm unmuting.
See.
There we go.
Hi, Megan.
Hi, honey.
So you two have obviously talked plenty, but I understand, maybe you haven't hung out in person yet.
No, we have not.
No.
All right. Well,
And I think
Fair enough.
this is our first video encounter, isn't it, Megan? Have we ever
Yeah, I
videoed
think so.
before?
No, I think we spend all of our time on the phone.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah.
great. Well, there you
See?
go.
Ta-da.
And Logan's here too.
Hi,
Hey, Logan.
how are you?
I'm well, thanks.
Great.
Hi, Logan.
Hi.
What a party. So quick introductions. Megan Devine is the author of It's Okay That You're Not Okay. No, It's Okay That, how come, and now it's sticking in my,
How many times have you said this?
It's Okay You're Not Okay. Did I get it right?
Yeah, it's okay that you're not okay. I have to check too, and I wrote the thing. It's okay.
This is
Yeah.
probably the most purchased book about grief in the last 10 years.
True story.
And a new grief journal that just came out that everyone should grab. There it is, How to Carry What Cannot Be or What Can't Be Fixed. And Megan and I have a book club that starts on Monday for that journal, which is very exciting. And then Logan Ury, who is a relationship expert. She is the relationship expert at Hinge, but also has an incredible book out called How to Not Die Alone that is behind you. There it is. So first, did Megan or Logan, did you have any questions for Anna? If not, I've got questions for all of you.
I have questions. Logan, do you have questions?
I do, but Megan, I'm very happy for you to go first.
Okay. So my question isn't about the book. My question, I'm going to check my notes because I like my question. Okay. So you have this really weird life of being the person who has hard conversations for a living. I think we all do sort of odd work, sort of thinking about the wider social sphere. So my question for you is like, what does being the person who has hard conversations for a living do to you outside of work? When people ask, what do you do? Like they don't already know you. When people ask, what do you do? How does being the person who has conversations for a living impact your outside of work life?
I'll answer this in two ways. The first is like really cool, which is people, when I say what I do for work, it changes what happens when you're chit-chatting at a cocktail hour or at a dinner table at a dinner party, in a way that immediately deepens what was happening. And that's cool. That's Rick, to just basically declare like, we can talk about this at this end of this table, like, I think the other way that I think about a lot in my personal life, is when I fall short, uh, of like communicating skillfully and lovingly, or even not communicating, behaving. Like I I feel, and I think about it a lot, and I'm like, where was that disconnect between what really, how to be a much better listener and um, participant in a conversation, and when I fail, or when I realize that I unintentionally have hurt somebody, it sticks, and I think about it a lot. Um, but I know I'm not alone in that. I had a really funny exchange with Dan Savage about this, and he said one of the things his husband likes to yell at him in fights is like, "Well, what would Dan Savage have to say about what you're saying?" And I think the gap between the person and the persona is real, so it keeps you, if you can, not pretend that gap isn't there and work at it. I think that's the work in the
Yeah, and
personal
I think
life.
that's the thing, right? Like you do this stuff for a living and you're also human.
Yeah.
Right? That and I think like what I hear you say is like I hold myself to this standard because I know this stuff. And I think people feel really daunted about these conversations because it feels so awkward and they want so badly to do it right. And I think one of the things to remember here is that even those of us who have hard conversations for a living stick our foots in our mouths all the time. I don't know, I do. Like I say stupid stuff all the time, and it's less about doing this perfectly and more about becoming more aware when you do it with less skill than you intend. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then repair. I
Mm-hmm.
think I've learned from you about repair that
Yeah.
just the like, oh shoot, I know I probably made you feel like the story you tell me in the book about the conversation you had with the friend. Do you remember where this wasn't actually someone doing the wrong thing, but finding a system to talk out of you had a friend who was very concerned about you, and you
Yeah.
described having a system where you would text back an asterisk just to show her that you were okay, but you were enjoying your alone time. Like, um, I love that. I love
Yeah.
finding other ways of having systems of like, this isn't going well, what we're trying to do here, but let's notice that and try something else.
Yeah, being in a place and trusting a relationship enough where you can say what we're doing isn't working together. Can we find a different way to try what we're trying, right? Because those are all bids for connection and attempts at support, and sometimes we're going to use our best skills to make that support happen, and it's not what's needed in that moment. So how do you have a conversation about how we're missing each other, right? And how do you build relationships where you can have those conversations? Because those are not easy text you once every 8 months conversations, right? Yeah.
Perfect time to go to the relationship expert.
Well, yes, Anna, great to see you. My question
There
is
you go.
about the topic of feedback. So obviously you're an expert on hard conversations, but I find one of the hardest conversations can really be giving somebody feedback. And so I'm curious if you have a personal framework that you follow for something like, you know, if I give this person feedback, can they take action on it? Or, you know, should I tell somebody if I don't like their partner? And so it's not that you are avoiding crucial conversations, I imagine, because you're good at them, but how do you decide whether or not to give somebody a hard piece of feedback?
Oh, that is a tricky question. I mean, I think giving somebody hard feedback in a personal realm, like I immediately started thinking about like edits at work, and that also is really hard and takes a lot of skill.
Yeah,
That I don't.
I'm interested in both work and personal for
Yeah.
you.
I mean, I think it's like, um, it's like sort of. I think it's about you. It starts, I think, with trying having to ask the question of like, can I tell you something I'm noticing? Like just signaling like gonna observe something, um, because uh and I think like the cliche way is, can I offer you some feedback? Like, but can I tell you, I'm noticing something. Like, does this seem like, am I getting this right? Like, it seems like maybe you're just like afraid that his kindness is like unfamiliar, and that makes you afraid about what kind of intimacy could happen if you are open to this. And then you can, because I might be wrong, especially if it's in the context of giving a friend feedback on their
Mhm.
romantic choices. Like they might say, actually, he's a really nice guy, but these other things don't connect. But um, I think of it that way. I think but it's about the timing, and it's about the venue. I think it's hard to do that over text. It has to be sort of, when you have the space, which can be hard to have in our relationships right now.
Yeah. Would you say that that's something that you pride yourself on, that tend to give people, especially in the personal realm, let's say, like the hard feedback that they need to hear? Or do you have any good stories about that?
Logan, I actually think that's not what I'm good at. Like I think that's a place where I could get a lot better. I think I lead with like, I'm trying to understand this, like a question asking. And I like, it takes me a while to get to like, how am I hearing what they're telling me? And do I have an observation to share that might be counter to how they're telling the story of what they think is going on? Like it
Yeah.
takes me, I have to like talk myself into that moment. And but I guess in my closest, most intimate relationships with my like husband, for example, I do give feedback. And like,
Does he ever say, what would Anna Sale say about this?
yeah. I mean, I give feedback, but I think when I give my most helpful, useful feedback, it's really from a place of like leading with what you think is motivating them or why they're doing what they're doing, and saying like, I think that I know this is really important to you and this is why you're doing this, but I'm noticing that I think you might be missing that this is happening as a result of this, that kind of thing. So that they can my goal then is to position myself as like allied alongside whoever I'm talking to, rather than like, this is what you're doing wrong, because then
I
they're
actually think
not.
that's extremely helpful feedback. Just to kind of say it back to you, it's what I'm hearing is that instead of saying like, can I give you feedback? You're doing this. It's coming from a place of curiosity. Like, I noticed that in these scenarios, this thing happens, or I notice when you're around your partner, it brings out this side of you. And then you're more just saying like, have you also noticed that? Or what does that mean to you? As opposed to assuming that you know what the other person's experience is, which I'm now like, oh, that's what most of my feedback sounds like. So I think
Oh,
that's actually a very helpful framework.
glad to give you helpful feedback on feedback.
Yes. Look at us.
I love that too. That's like classic couples counseling, right? Like to start with common ground. I notice when you do this, and I'm wondering if this is your goal. Is that true? Like that question about, is that true, or is that accurate, or have you found, how do you feel about that? Like it's really inviting that other person into curiosity about what you see happening, which is always like, I think that curiosity is always a better opener, especially if you have to give slightly uncomfortable feedback. Like curiosity is way better than, why are you doing this and you're doing it wrong, right? I think comes out in that tone of like, can I give you some feedback? Which is really just code for, you're seriously screwing this up. Just sit down and let me tell you about it.
Yeah.
Right?
In general, I think get curious is some of the best couples advice you could ever give.
Yeah.
And in order to get to that place, Megan, you actually have to be curious about it, as opposed to an ideology or a fixed, statement. I find that the words never and always shouldn't be included in these conversations.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point, right? Because very often I think we're looking to give feedback because something is pissing us off. Mm-hmm. Right? So when you're pissed off, it's really hard to be open and curious and use your good skills. Right? I think this is where some process discussions are really handy, especially in relationships that are sort of ongoing, to not try to have a highly skilled conversation when your emotions are up, because you can't access great skills when you're angry or when you're too hurt to say anything. So I really like in a less charged moment to be able to say, I notice that when I get really angry or really hurt, I have a hard time being considerate and curious. Can we come up with a system that like one of us can tap out if we're feeling like our emotions are getting too big and we can't use our skills, right? So that's like planning for, how will we disagree? How will we give feedback to each other? How will we talk about when things aren't working, right? You can't have those sorts of process conversations in the heat of the moment. I don't think we should expect that of each other. Like when I am overtired, over hungry, and it's been a really, really busy day, I am not going to sit down and have a highly skilled conversation with anyone. Yeah, but if I've set that up ahead of time, then I can say like, I'm having one of those moments. Can we circle back and talk about this like when I feel human again?
I'm going to throw in another question.
Yeah.
I think we could actually talk about this for the next 5 hours. And I'm also really enjoying asking Anna Sale questions. I don't know about.
Keep asking Anna questions because I don't get enough Anna time.
So this is a question for Anna and then Megan, and then actually might make its way to Logan as well. Anna, you talk, and obviously Megan, you do a lot of work around this, about the notion of not wanting to fix it. And that so often when we're having hard conversations, we come at it, it's a little bit of a variation on what we were talking about, but wanting to fix something. Something's wrong, I want to fix it. And that's one of the key tools in going in, is getting, away from this fixing it notion. And I know that really relates obviously to grief, and it relates to relationships in general, but talk to us about this fixing it mentality and how we avoid it.
Me.
Anna, not me.
Yeah, Anna, yeah.
I mean, I learned a lot about this first from Megan, because I think I think profoundly, like the example of grief and loss after death is where you see the absolute lack of utility of trying to fix. You have this urge to fix and this complete impossibility. Like you cannot fix, you cannot bring back, you cannot replace. But I think that idea is also really, I found when I was writing my chapter about talking about money, like it was a really useful kind of idea to think about, because I think why we have such weird, like euphemistic and unspecific conversations about money is because we're really afraid of running up against the reality of a material difference of someone we care about. One of us has more, one of us has less, and we want to make that difference go away. We want to minimize it. And in fact, you can't do that in conversations like with money, and to pretend that those differences don't exist can be quite damaging to a relationship. So I just think that's so useful. And it also makes hard conversations feel a lot, I think, less intimidating to start, because you can say, I feel this pressure to want to lift this pain or discomfort from my loved one's shoulders. Oh, I'm not going to be able to do that with words. What I can do instead is try to join them in talking about it together, ask them to describe it, be with them rather than trying to fix them.
Yeah, absolutely. Megan.
I love that you brought in the money chapter here, because I think sometimes when we start talking about grief related to death, we get this real tunnel vision of like there's a special set of skills that you need only in grief related to death, and any other hard things are sort of off the table. But that mechanism of anytime we see pain in somebody we care about for whatever reason, it's that really human temptation to make it better for them. And just as you described, right, like we can't make that pain go away. We can't fix that for them. And that's true in any kind of interpersonal difficult subject or hard conversation. You can't change a difference in perspectives on socioeconomic status. You can't change somebody's ideas about what they want in their end of life issues, right? Like what we can do is build conversations about the gap, right? You have this understanding about money and I have this understanding about money. And we can acknowledge those differences without trying to fix each other and like sway the person to your way of thinking. I think that a lot of our hard conversations are about trying to correct somebody's experience, to make their experience a little bit more like ours. And it's not that we're mean people coming, with nefarious intent. I think it's more that sort of combative, win the person to your side style of conversation is what we've been taught. And to have these more egalitarian, curiosity-based conversations about traditionally difficult things, like that's a whole new skill set. And it's something that is applicable to any interpersonal conversation or relationship, whether that's professional or personal, right? These are all the same skills we're talking about. And speaking to the struggle, right? Instead of trying to win the battle, right? So speaking to the struggle is exactly what you described in the money chapter. Like, I have this understanding and these needs, and you have these needs and that understanding. One of us doesn't have to win in order to find a way to move forward with this conversation or this relationship or this contract. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Logan, I think about this in relationship contexts, and one of the parts, something I wanted to linger on in my sex chapter was like the importance for when I was getting together with Arthur, my now husband, of just having a period where I could say like, I don't know. I don't know what this is that we're building together. And it was really hard for me to feel that for a long time, because you want to know, I feel this connection with you. Are we building something or are we not building something? How invested are we? And like, when I think in a relationship, it's even trickier to not want to kind of like fix and come to an agreement, because the whole thing about what a relationship is like coming to an agreement about what you will be to one another. I don't know. How do you think about fixing,
Yeah,
trying not to fix?
I have a couple of thoughts on this. So the first thing that came to mind was just the idea of acceptance, of accepting that somebody has flaws and that most people won't change. And so sometimes people come to me and they're like, okay, I've been dating this person for a while. I like everything about them, but, and then they talk about the one thing. And there's this idea of like, could I find somebody who's has all those great qualities, but not this bad quality? And then of course it's the conversation around like, well, whoever you're with is going to have some bad quality. And so it's much more about acceptance versus trying to like optimize for the perfect person or fix somebody. And the Gottmans have a really great stat around this, which is that 69% of problems in relationships are perpetual and they're not fixable. And I think that's helpful to hear, because when you understand that most problems won't come to a solution, you just have to learn to live with them. You stop trying to always fix something and you say, okay, our thing is that I like to be at the airport early and you like to be at the airport so you never sit in the seat at the gate. Let's go to the airport separately, because we're not going to solve our punctuality issue. And so really just coming, almost laughing at it and be like, this is one of the 69%, versus being like, how do we work towards not having any problems? And so that stat in particular has been really helpful to me. And a lot of what I talk to people about is trying to not fix something. And then with your example with Arthur, I think that's one of the things that makes modern relationships so hard, is that we're living in this era of big data, of Google, of Amazon reviews, Yelp reviews. And there's this feeling of, oh, I can get certainty, right? I can get the best Bluetooth headphones. But with relationships, it's always a leap of faith. And at a certain point, you're saying, with the information I know, I'm going to commit to this person. And I think people more than ever are really struggling in that ambiguity, because there is no such thing as being 100% certain about the person that you're committing to.
And what I want to underscore is the great news that is not fixing. Because fixing so much work.
Yeah.
It's really, and when you like, one, check yourself, are you going into this conversation to fix something? And then when you get the like meta lesson that you can't, I mean, your life is so much better.
It's so much easier. It really is. Like, you step out of so much drama and so much struggle when you realize not only is it not your job to fix things for people, but that it's actually not possible to do it. Like, I feel like it lets you off the hook, and that relieves a lot of the awkwardness and the pressure that makes us say things that we look back and go, I can't believe I said that, right? It is so much easier to stop fixing people.
Definitely.
I love the great news. That makes me want to have an unfixable gospel choir. I just like like gather with, celebrate what's not, what you can't fix. it's like, I love
a
that.
full like tent
That's
revival movement
Yeah.
around just letting go of fixing. So we have a related question from Ari Grainer, who happens to be somebody who I'm madly in love with, who is tuned in. Ari asks, well, first says, Anna, I'm a huge fan of yours. Thank you so much for your work. I'm curious about how you find the balance of holding space and empathy and compassion with someone going through it without falling into the pit of where they are. So this is related, but also different.
Yeah.
Question.
I mean, I find it's not it's not always easy to not fall into the pit of where they are, but sometimes it happens, but it doesn't always happen. And I'm interested in when it does happen. It happens for me. It's so much about what's going on in my own life, of when if they are describing something that I have a great fear of, or a great, my own pain around, that's where I find myself falling in. For me right now, it's really difficult to talk about losing children, or the pain of having a child who is in pain, because I have two little kids. So I think it's too hot for me to sit with for a long time. But most often, it's that I don't feel that. I feel the great sort of privilege and like a sacred joy of being able to witness and be with someone, in allowing them to share something that they have been carrying. So it doesn't feel heavy or like a drain. I enlivened by it, which is surprising to me. What do you, Megan, what do you find? I mean, talking to people about grief, Michael, what do you all find? Do you?
I was just having this conversation with John Moe earlier this week about how he talks about depression all the time, and people ask him, like, you listen to really heavy, depressing stories about depression all the time. How does that not set off your own depression? So we had this great conversation about that, and when I first started this work, I felt like I had an absolutely limitless capacity to witness other people's pain, because my capacity is really big. Like, I feel very much the same way you do, that it's an honor and a privilege to be able to hear people tell me things that they can't say anywhere else. Like, that is, I never take that for granted. That's amazing that can happen. I have learned over the 9 years doing this work that my capacity is not limitless. That capacity is vast, but it has edges and it has limits. And just what you were saying, it depends on what's going on in my own life. Like, if there's a lot going on, You might notice that I keep looking outside because my dog is sick and she's outside in the sun, and I want to make sure that she's not like overheating. So like we all have I think a finite capacity, not good, not bad, just the vessel that it is. And depending on what else is taking up space in that sort of determines what's left over or what's available to be present to this work and to lean into the honor and privilege it is to do the work. And that I think comes back for me to like knowing myself. What are my early warning signs that my ability to bear witness and show up and pay attention is fraying at the edges, so that I can take those early warning signs and pay attention and step back and take care of myself in the way that I need to, so that I can show up when it matters in the ways that I need to. Right. So I think it's really both of those things. It's that dance with yourself about knowing where your edges are and what you need in order to be able to show up to your people and your situations and your world in the way that you most want to. What do you need in order to be able to do that in a sustainable, sustained fashion?
Yeah, and I think for me, one thing is to actually feel. It's okay to feel the emotion. It's okay to be moved. I hold space for people all of the time. A lot of times on Zoom right now, and I'm moved to tears, and I'm overwhelmed, and I'm not trying to hold it back. And that so that's one, is that's actually, it's okay to also feel that pain with a person, and to be demonstrative about that. And then I think if you do notice that something is too hot, you can either place a boundary around it, let them know respectfully it's hot, or you can be like, hey, it's coming up for me because I have a fear around that too. Without, there is this idea that holding space is just muscular, it's impassive or something. Like, you have to be so strong to hold space. So sometimes to hold space, you need to show your whole humanity, and that it's, it's really hard for you right now to do that. And sometimes that is the thing that does, the most work, I would say.
What I love about what you just described, so coming back to Anna and your work, is like that conversation that Michael just described is a really hard conversation, right? I see that you're in pain, and I'm in so much of my own pain that I'm not sure how to show up for you. Like, have you found those sorts of multi-leveled hard conversation around over hard conversation in your work, Anna? And if so, like, what have you seen out there with those sorts of multi-leveled hard conversations?
I mean, I think that's interesting. I think more often comes up in my own relationships, because it's hard. It's very, I think what that's built in is like, when you drop, like, it's really hard to, you will be disappointing someone potentially, and not being able to show up for them in the way that they expect of you. And so I think it's just, this has come up a lot in my pandemic remote friendships, is just like figuring out how to talk about that, and how to be a friend who shows up when you're needed, and also have relationships where you can say, I know that you want it, like, can we assume, I had a conversation with one of my sisters once, and just said, like, I know that you want to be in more regular contact, but like, can you assume that the best intentions on all sides, like, we're all doing our best, which can be a hard thing when somebody is not there when you want them to be. And you can make up stories about why that is, that are often not very loving. um, but I think that that's like next level, like, hard conversations of just like, I am here, and to be able to have a friend where you can say, this was disappointing to me, and I love you, like, or that doesn't change how I feel about you, but this was a bummer, you know. um that's that's the stuff that really makes a relationship, I feel like, a space where you can have more feelings all at once, you know?
Yeah. Logan, any thoughts? I've got a fun question for Logan and Anna, and then we've got a question from Deb. And then we'll probably be out of time, which sucks because I just want to hang out. But Logan.
I mean, yeah, my one thought is I feel like I'm going to use what Anna said, in a conversation with a friend who I feel like I've been having a hard pandemic friendship thing where it's just like, I know how you want me to show up for you right now. I'm having trouble showing up in that way. But I really liked Anna's language around, how did you just say it? It was like, you know, this is a bummer, but I love you. It's like, I feel like she kind of gave me that feedback and sort of just finding the way to say, like, I know what you need from me. I promise if I could give that to you right now, I would. I can't, but like, this is just one phase in a long friendship, and kind of just reiterating that foundation of like, we're going to always be friends. This is like one tough moment. I just found that phrasing really reassuring.
Yeah, that's a powerful. Because people, I mean, that's what they want, to make sure that you can hold their weight either in the immediate or for the long term.
Yeah.
We don't, we need a mix.
Right. And I think, yeah, in romantic relationships, it's like, never threaten to leave, because once you threaten to leave, like everything else like is suddenly in play. But it's like, I'm here and I'm in this, but like we need to talk about this hard thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are dangerous things to put on the table. So Deb has a question, and then a kind of more fun summer love question, to end our chat together. So Deb wants to know what is happening nationwide to get all Americans to discuss these heavy issues as just part of life, so early in life, or early in life and ongoing. We see crazy ads on TV at prime times for lots of drugs like Viagra, but we would never hear a PSA on talking about death or sex or money. What are some good things that are going on that we can tell Deb about?
I mean, I think that something interesting, and I'm not sure it's good and bad about this moment, is there's no pretending that profound grief and loss is not a part of our society right now, and we have to get to know that as we get to know whatever is coming next. So I do feel, I've been Death, Sex, and Money started in 2014, and just the visibility of conversations about death, about mental health, about even money. It's just like really, um, I think it started where the internet became a place where there were interesting conversations happening that were more concrete, and then I think it's trickling out into how people actually do talk to one another. I mean, just look at, like, it's interesting that Joe Biden is our president right now, and he is very open about the way grief is a companion in his life, and how powerful that is for all of us to have to witness, instead of having a leader who might be modeling, like being strong arming your way through life through other means. So I think that there are positive things happening as far as loss and grief and all of the feelings that come with it, including anger.
Yeah, I would agree. Megan, Logan, any exciting, other good news we can share with Deb?
Yeah, one small piece of good news is that from the dating realm. So people used to not really talk about hard things in dating until what we call the DTR, the define the relationship conversation. And so until, usually in the beginning, you're kind of pretending to be this person, I'm pretending to be that person. At a certain point, one of us is like, all right, what are we doing? And then you actually come together and are like, are we on the same page? But with the pandemic, people were forced to talk about stuff way earlier. And so we were hearing conversations about, will you be wearing a mask? Have you been socially distancing? Who's in your quarantine pod? Like, my elderly parents live with me, and so I need you to know this. And so people much earlier on were forced to talk about hard things. And then sometimes they were like, I couldn't talk to that person. They were extremely defensive. They were rude. So I'm not going to go on a date with them. And the ability to actually get to that point earlier was very helpful because you were actually able to say, is this the type of person with whom I can even have a hard conversation?
Yeah, great point. DTR, define the relationship. That's now in my toolkit.
I know, it's good, right?
Megan?
I get asked all the time when I do media, has the pandemic changed the way that we do grief? And my answer is no, which sounds like a terrible thing, but it's not. What I think has changed because of this experience over the last 18 months is that more people understand that the ways that we've sort of traditionally or historically talked about hard things doesn't work, right? Because everybody has lost something, from the loss of daily routine to the loss of your home or your income to family members. Everybody has lost something. And I think that means that everybody has bumped up against the really rotten system we have for talking about hard things. And that can seem like, oh gosh, like everybody's waking up to what a disaster it is, but everybody's got to wake up to what a disaster it is in order to be motivated to do something different. So while we're still in the hot mess of, we're not being taught these skills, there's no, well, we're working on it, but there's no like public service announcements, public education campaigns to get these communication skills and tools out into the general population. More people understand that we need them, which is how we end up getting them. Does that make sense? It's like the demand pushes for tools out in the world. As somebody who tries to make these skill sets and these conversations happen all the time and trying to get actionable PSAs out into the general population, I can say that more people like you all saying we need this is how we make that stuff happen. This kind of change is a grassroots movement. And it really is people being brave enough to have these conversations in their own relationships, in their own communities, and then asking for them out in the world, asking for them in your school systems, asking for them if you're a university student, asking for these things from your healthcare providers, right? Grassroots demand is what makes those sorts of things. I think it's Deb that you said, why isn't this out there? Let's start asking for it, right? That demand creates the world we want.
It does. And the other thing that's going to continue to dawn on us is disease is very expensive.
Yes.
Sickness is very expensive, and sickness has a lot to do with repression.
Yep.
And once we actually get a little bit more into the slow money, I'm going to try to connect it all together, and then we're going to land at sex. Slow money realm. We're looking for longer returns. And once we're willing to invest on longer returns, we'll invest in wellness, and we'll start investing real money around curing repression, which is the work that we're all talking about anyway. So last question, we're at time, but so this will be a lightning round. Prediction, we're coming out of a global pandemic. The sun is out, people are wearing less clothing. Are we going to see a massive sexual revolution, summer of love that starts? Just want your predictions, and then we'll close. We haven't talked about sex much yet. Anna, start.
I don't know, maybe. If that's what you're up for right now, I hope you're doing it. I also think there could be a summer of profound rest, hopefully, of just maybe you just need to take a blanket out in the sun and lay on the grass and sleep and absorb, So I think hopefully you have some time to kind of give yourself some love. And then if you're up for it, I hope you're finding all the love and getting to do all the love that you want.
Love it. Summer of sleep, sexy fall. Okay. Megan, and then Logan, you're going to take us out because you actually have the data behind this.
Okay, here's my prediction. During the pandemic, early pandemic, there was a lot of there's going to be a pandemic baby boom. And I was like, no, there isn't. Everybody's scared of the future. There is not going to be a pandemic baby boom. We might see a baby boom similar to what we saw after World War II as the novelty of normalcy sort of comes back for the summer. I think what might happen is people will want to jump into like a hot, sexy summer thing, and then thinking that they can jump into it without addressing any of the emotional experience that they've been through. So my prediction is that there's going to be a lot of like initial kerfuffle, excitement, face mashing, and then a pretty quick, wait a second, there's a whole 99% of the rest of me. Can I bring that in here? So I think we're gonna see a lot of what Logan was talking about with the DTR pieces and vetting the emotional capacity of a relationship a lot faster. And there's going to be a lot of an awkward bouncing around between like, oh my God, we're free. Oh crap, I have a lot to talk about.
I love it. All right, Logan, what do you think?
Yeah, so we have done a lot of research on this at Hinge, the dating app where I work, and we were getting all these press requests where people are saying, oh, aren't we going to have a shot girl summer or waxed and vaxxed or, the whoring 20s. But when we actually did the research, 75% of people told us that what they want right now is a relationship, and that dating has moved from being a second or third priority to work and family and friends to actually for them now their first priority, because what they told us is that, like, you know what, I spent the whole pandemic working and work did not keep me warm at night. Work was not the person who I could talk to about how hard this was. And so for me, my book is all about, like, if you don't want to die alone, like, here's what to do. And I'm like, oh, now people actually understand like urgency around that, because they're like, I thought love was just something that would happen to me, and now I actually have to go and get it. And so we're seeing two major trends. One, 75% of people want this relationship, and so we're predicting a relationship renaissance. And then two, 51% of people said that they're experiencing FODA, which stands for fear of dating again. And so there's just a ton of anxiety around, my social skills are rusty. I haven't, been intimate with anybody in 18 months. Like, I have nothing to talk about because I haven't left my apartment in this long. And so there's going to be this interesting negotiation between your own internal anxiety. I want to find someone, but I'm also really scared about getting back out there. And so I really like what Megan said. Maybe we'll see like some initial excitement and face smashing, then some like standing back and be like, what do I really want? But I think a nice silver lining of this moment was people realizing how important relationships are, and now being willing to prioritize that over work, which can of course be the most seductive one of all.
I love it. I love it. I think HBO should give us a nightly talk show. Right? Our audience is like, maybe. No, I think it was fantastic. I appreciate the three of you so much, and we're here for you. Anna, we've been sharing about the book. We're going to continue. It is beautiful and brilliant, and thank you for giving us this time.
Oh, thanks for being with me, all of you tonight. Megan, I hope your dog heals up. Logan, and nice to see you again.
Thank you for writing
the data. Thank you for sharing. And Michael, thanks for creating this space for us.
Of course. And thanks to the audience. Kaylee, you can take us away with some Bob Dylan. Kaylee Cole is the producer in the background that makes this all happen. We'll see you all soon. Thanks so much and good night.
See you Monday.
See you Monday. That's right.